Okay, for you boys and girls out there, no talking. This movie is called Novitiate, and it's about the transition that happened right after Vatican II. And I'm here with the director, and your whole family's involved with this as well, right?
Yeah, my dad and my sister have executive producer credits because they were just so supportive and were like there throughout the whole process. But I mean, it's really they're not creatively involved. I mean, it was really myself.
It's like the Warner Brothers almost, right?
Yeah, exactly, like the Ringling Brothers.
Very good. Well, first of all, I know that you didn't go to Catholic school, right? But what brought you to this? Mother Teresa, pretty much, right?
Yeah. I completely accidentally. I was in an airport. I mean, 6 years ago, something like that, and it was right. I think it was right around the time that Mother Teresa died, and so I happened to find this book in the airport that was called "Come Be My Light," and it was a compilation of all these letters that she'd written during the course of her life. To various friends and confidants and people that were close in her life. And they were all just consumed with her relationship with God, who was her husband. And
But they wear the wedding ring on the right finger, right?
Yeah,
Right
yeah.
ring finger.
But the turmoil and the intensity and the passion of the relationship is something that I had never conceptualized before. I guess there was no reason for me to think about it, so I wouldn't have thought one way or the other, but I was just blown away by how romantic the relationships that they had with God.
Powerful, and it's probably the most intimate of all relationships because when saints go into ecstasy, it defies any drug or any sexual experience because it encompasses,
and Mother Teresa, who I had always seen one way as one type of woman, just became this totally different, very extremist, very person living for their passion. And so that made me realize I knew nothing about nuns and that I had preconceived notions that were like totally different from what their life was really about. So that's sort of what got me going on the path. It was not by any means a strange thing. In fact, it was an admirable thing, and like to have a nun in your family was, prior to Vatican II, was like having a cop in your family or having a politician in the family. It's like somebody who ascended to a pretty impressive and highly respected role in society.
And there was always an element of secrecy, an element of reverence, and they were not really, we had them as teachers, so, I owe them a debt of gratitude. I learned to read and write, and my penmanship is very good. And they worked long hours for no pay, and they were totally devoted to their children. And it was like a thing that was, and in those days, that education was second to none.
Yeah.
I mean, you had...
Yeah, the nuns came over really at the turn of the century and built the Catholic school system in this country, which soon became like the standard bearer of like private schools in America. So nuns really created an education system that was like at that time bar none, and it was the most sort of like upwardly mobile.
Yes,
So if people started making more money, sending your kid to parochial school was a sign that you'd kind of made it. It was like...
Yeah, but understand this. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, and there was parishes. Every block had its own parish and churches. It's called the City of Churches, Brooklyn, in those days. And I came from a working class background. We didn't pay tuition to go to Catholic school. I think it was voluntary, and I believe, and my parents had to, really struggle for it. They paid like maybe $5 a month or some ridiculous thing.
In my movie, the scholarship program, at a certain point they became really flush with cash, as did the convents, and they could afford that. But like in my movie, the girl gets a scholarship too. It's like...
And also families that they would endow parishes and convents with property, with stock in AT&T and all these great things. And you're right, they were flush with money, and they
Yeah.
had the ability to build hospitals.
The recruitment for convents was like all-time high right before Vatican II. They had an enormous amount of money. They were completely sort of self-contained, meaning like they belonged to the diocese, but they were sort of self-operating. Nobody was really like interfering.
They owned their own
too
property.
much. They owned their property, and then Vatican II just created this upheaval.
That was the thing too, that the hierarchy of the church, male, the bishops, they would sort of run shotgun over the convents,
Yeah.
and they would really decimate the religious orders of their property.
Yeah.
And they had that attack from
Yeah.
the hierarchy.
Yeah.
But anyway, what happens is that your film really is a sensitive piece, and I mean, you don't have to be Catholic to enjoy it, because it shows the struggle of women. And you had a group of these 20-year-old women, and you did it beautifully with the way as young people. And I don't know how you sort of got them all together and to behave as if they were in the convent, but you did a great job. And it makes it very believable, and it gives us a glimpse of that point in history, which is remarkable. And what's your next step? What are you going to do next?
I have two projects I'm working on. I really, I kind of am very like devoted to the idea of making as many movies as possible where I can have a predominantly female cast, or where it's a movie that's way more about the women's or female experience than the male experience, only for the sake of balance. So the two projects that I'm working on now are completely different from novitiate and from religious issues and all that kind of stuff, but they have the same situation of a predominantly female cast and of, to a certain extent, a David and Goliath relationship between a woman who's, I sort of consider the Reverend Mother like that, a woman who's like the individual against an institution that is in some way trying to take
That's
their
wonderful.
rights away.
The other thing is I have to ask you two questions. First of all, did you go to film school?
I did not know.
So you're self-trained, pretty much?
Yeah, I mean, I studied film theory and analysis like rigorously in college and then through my 20s, and I did a lot of creative writing. So the writing component, I had to learn the structure of screenplay writing, but the how to create characters, all that kind of stuff. I had a background in, and I was quite good at photography. I was quite into photography. So the rest of it, I just, this is my third project, so I just.
And the last question is
Yes.
this: what format did you use? What type of cameras? What type of?
We used the Alexa, which is digital. It's a widescreen format. It's like a super wide movie. And I believe we used a lot of prime lenses. My DP would probably know like a little bit better.
And the sound was exquisite. It was beautiful sound.
Yeah.
Well, I wish you all the best.
Because we shot in those places that are built for that, like the churches and things that are built for that.
Yeah. Beautiful.
A nun? Oh, Kathleen. You're a 17-year-old girl.
I was called, and I'm gonna become a nun, and there's really nothing that you can say that's gonna make me change my mind.
Good afternoon, all of you. Since, unfortunately, God can't be here to run this convent himself, my voice will serve as a stand-in for his. You'll be spending the next 6 months as postulants. After that, you'll enter the novitiate. Any questions? Put your hand down, sister. Postulants don't have questions. And you are free to go home.
What is this you're reading?
Something to do with this Vatican II. Our Pope has suddenly turned himself into some sort of reformer.
Well, that's a good thing. Perhaps change is
You
good.
think the church is in need of change? I happen to think the church is perfect the way it is.
Are you still encouraging all of your novitiates for extreme acts of penance?
I would like you to use the discipline on yourself.
That's got to stop.
I don't think you really understand what this will do to us.
We're not supposed to think about each other because we're not here for each other. We are here only for God.
Maybe I could just touch your hand for a second.
We're really not supposed to touch like that.
What is going on here? She looks like she's dying. I think it's wrong of you to keep us in the dark.
The church gave me my work, my community, even my identity. And now the church is trying to invalidate all that, saying none of it matters. So my question is, what is it that really does still matter?